I have the pleasure today, the distinct pleasure of interviewing Jay Papasan. Jay Papasan is the best-selling author, co-author of The One Thing, and author of many other books, as well as a vice president and executive editor at Keller Williams International Realty, the world's largest real estate company. Jay has written or co-authored a string of best-selling books on everything from business strategy to real estate to financial management to everyday productivity. And almost all of these books have found their way onto numerous bestseller lists like the Wall Street Journal and USA Today, the New York Times. And these books have sold to collectively over 8 million copies. Now, my favorite among these, and one of the biggest, is The One Thing, the classic seminal productivity and prioritization tome that he co-authored with Gary Keller. Jay, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So let's talk about The One Thing, the title of the book, the central concept. For somebody who might not have picked up the book yet and read it, and I would recommend for that person, absolutely, you got to read this book. But for somebody who's just listening to this right now, how would you describe The One Thing to a person who hasn't read the book?
All right. So the subtitle is the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. And I usually try to start there. And there's two words I like to emphasize. The first one is simple. So the book is about an approach. It can be about an approach to work, or it can be an approach to your health, your marriage, whatever you want. It's about an approach that leads to results, but it's simple. And so a lot of people hear what we talk about. It's like, that's nothing new. That doesn't sound right. And that's on purpose. It's actually, I think, a lot harder to make something simple than complicated, but people can't do complicated for long. So we try to keep it very simple. And the other is extraordinary. It's not about average results. Like, what we're doing, we'll already do that, right? That's what average is. But we tried to look at the businesses and the individuals who are truly exceeding in the top 10% or 1% of their industries and say, what do they have in common? This is nothing new, but it's simple. So it's an approach, it's simple, and it's really about getting the best of you in whatever area you're going for. Without going into the technical aspects, that's what the book's about.
Absolutely. And as the title might suggest, it really encourages you to choose one thing. And, there's some surprisingly philosophical elements to The One Thing. But one of the core tenets is that success is experienced sequentially, not simultaneously. And I always see people who first encounter this idea of The One Thing, and they say, I've got too much to do in my life. How dare you? It's almost like they want to slap you on the face and say, how dare you tell me to do only one thing when I've got kids and I've got this? But that's sort of explained by this quote, success is sequential, not simultaneous. Can you guide us through how we can do one thing and yet do a lot of things? We're just doing them one at a time.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand with focus. I didn't know this, but when you focus on something, it's not that you're putting a spotlight on it, it's you're making everything else disappear. And when you decide to do something, you're cutting away everything else. That's the root. And so this whole idea is to really focus on the things that matter most, that get us our biggest results. We use that principle to get people not to the handful of things that matter, but to really narrow it down. What's the one thing? We have other responsibilities. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I have an executive job. I'm a writer. But when you look up for this day, this week, this month, you can identify your top priority and give it absolute clearance to blow through all the red lights. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else is easier or unnecessary? All right. So it's a bit of a mouthful. What's the one thing I can do? So it's not 10 things, it's one thing. And it's what you can already do. A lot of people I hear say would, should, or could. And I usually emphasize that, there's the old Shel Silverstein poem, all the woulda, coulda, shouldas ran away and hid from one little did. Action gets us results, and then we see what works, and we get to feed it more and more and more, right? So we start right there, such that by doing it just means that anything we do can't be a one-to-one ratio. And in my experience, most people already know what it is, and they feel guilty for not doing it.
One thing I can personally attest from having, I think it's been years now that I've been asking myself this question, is that you can really go through a rabbit hole. It can really take you to some incredibly profound places. And I think, again, not to be overly lavish in my praise, but I really think The One Thing is the kind of book that you can reread, because as you can experience it at multiple levels. So for example, you could ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do today such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? Oh, well, I guess if I pre-plan my week, then all of my employees wouldn't be asking me what they should be doing, I could send them their priorities and I can get caught up, and so that I can eliminate the dependencies. But as you keep asking yourself that question, you could even come up with things like, wow, what we're doing in our business is not even the highest revenue generating thing for us to be doing.
If you can get a little closer to understanding your purpose, your big one thing on that big scale, it gives you priority. What we posited in the book is that the most successful people, most successful companies had a clarity around their underlying, this is what we're about. This is who we are. And that allowed them to say yes to what they needed to say yes. It gave them priority. And we believe that being productive, the simplest definition is just doing your priorities. But I think we imagine a lot worse consequences to saying no than actually exist. And the flip is the rewards of saying no are far greater than we imagine. And so I've had so many conversations. One stat I read, roughly 20% of people have a clear understanding of their purpose. So not many people, but what you can do is pick a direction. You can identify the things that you are passionate about, right? I use the fork, like, I know that I want it to be warmer, so I probably should be heading south. Well, just by virtue of that really generous, sense of direction, right? I'm just picking one compass direction. I've also eliminated 3 others. But it's so powerful when you get a clear sense of what's important to you and what would be a real cost to you if you didn't explore. There's the flip side, like what would be great for you to do in your life, but what would be the impact to you if you never did it? I usually ask people, so if you don't do that, how will you feel? And if they don't get kind of like a quivery lip thing going on, we're probably not there yet.
Yeah,
because the cost of failure should be high.
I could not agree with you more. One of the things I tell my clients, because they'll sometimes hear this question and they just start, that question alone overwhelms them, even though the exercise is going to ultimately de-overwhelm, because once you decide what you want to be about, you can eliminate all of the other things. What I like to say is choose something today and feel free to change it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You're not going to make it to the NBA finals and just be invited. You got to play high school ball, and then you got to play college ball, and then you actually, this is a process. You can't go straight to the end. And so I always encourage people who are out there, understand that your life is not given to you. It's created by you. And this is your job to give it meaning and to infer meaning into it. Jay, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Demir. I'm really happy to be here.